Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the TT podcast. Finally, a women's Tour de France is back on the calendar. Starting in Paris, we've got 8 stages, 4 gravel sectors, and a brutally steep finale on the Super Planche des Belles Filles. It is time for the much anticipated Tour de France Femmes Avec Zwift. And joining me to preview the race is my co-host, Tom. Tom, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. It's good to be back. We've had a longer pause than usual since we last recorded. So, yeah. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, and for no real reason, really, to be honest. It's been, I was traveling back from France and I'd say I was jet lagged, but there's no real country that's closer to the UK than France. That's not an excuse.
And you're in a car.
Yeah, but we'll do a bumper episode on the men's Tour de France sometime next week. At the moment, Tom, I'm very excited for the women's Tour de France.
So am I. It's really good to see them, getting a proper race rather than, I think in the past they've just sort of paid lip service because they think they have to. And now they seem to be taking it seriously.
Yeah. Tom, do you mind if I start off with a little history lesson here?
Not at all.
Wonderful. Well, I have been doing a lot of research on the women's Tour de France because I'm actually writing quite a long form piece as part of my studies at the moment. And you will hear a lot kind of in the run-up. You might have heard a lot in the run-up to this, that this is being called the inaugural Tour de France Femmes Avec Zwift. That is true, but it is not the first ever women's Tour de France. Now, that was Tom, do you know when the first ever women's Tour de France was?
Right. So we were just talking about this off air, and I said the 80s. So 1984.
1955.
Okay, I was way off, yeah.
It was a single edition race, and it was won by an Isle of Man rider, a Manx rider called Millie Robinson. But after that one year, it was kind of pulled from the calendar. It didn't get the media coverage they thought it would, probably because they didn't really give it a chance to. It then came back in the 1980s for 6 editions, and you are correct in saying that was 1984.
I had no idea. That was a complete guess that year, but I'll take it. Yeah.
Well, you were correct. The kind of plan was that the women raced the last 70 kilometers or so of the men's routes, which is not really a way to organize a race. It's kind of a cheap cop-out way to do it. But over the 6 years, the number of stages reduced from 18 in the first edition to 12 by 1989, the last edition. And then it was pulled from the calendar. After that, kind of 25 years passed, and there was a lot of ardent campaigning from riders within the camp, and La Course was introduced in 2014. Now, this tended to be a kind of criterium style race that, despite promises from the organizers, never grew beyond a single day event. So kind of over the last 70 years, we've had a sequence of what I'm going to call false dawns for women's cycling. But now I think we get the impression that this year's race is a real turning point.
I think it's a turning point, definitely. Even before we get to talking about the route and the riders, you can see sort of the level of organization the ASO put into it. They've got a lot more dedicated TV coverage and the media surrounding it. They're giving it the exposure that it merits, rather than, like I said, just sort of paying lip service before and saying, look, here is our women's race.
Well, should we go through the route then? Should we start with that?
By all means, yeah, let's do it.
Now, let's have a look. All the stages play out in northeast France, which I think is a bit of a shame. There's 8 stages, of course, all of them in that one kind of area of France.
Yeah.
As I say, I think it's a shame, but I think logistically, we've got teams at this Tour. There are 24 teams at this Tour de France, and a handful of them are on a proper shoestring budget. So I don't know the decision to do that, but I imagine it was something to do with the fact that some of these teams are not going to be able to afford to lug everything round the entirety of the country.
Well, I think this is as well. Look, if it's going to be a 1 week 8-stage race, you can't fit all of France in that time, can you? They'd have to be doing 300k stages.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And obviously, I think the idea of this race, well, I'm sure the idea of the race is that it's going to grow, maybe not year on year, but kind of over the next decade, sustainably, so that the teams can also grow along with that and can afford to, travel around a bit more. But stage 1, the first stage, is essentially a carbon copy of the first ever La Course event that took place in 2014. It is a criterium race on Paris' Champs-Élysées. That year it was won by Marianne Vos. This year, she's back on the start list.
Yeah, starting at the Eiffel Tower as well. I assume they're just going to go around and take in everything Paris has to offer on the way. There's a big, showcase for the event.
Yeah, it's 11 or 12 laps. And I think the interesting thing is with the men's race, the final day in Paris is a bit of a procession because it's the last day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that first ever La Course in 2014, it was raced flat out criterium style. And obviously with the terrain of the Champs-Élysées being cobbles, that meant that quite a few riders got punctures. And when you get a puncture, when it's being raced at that speed, you can get caught out and you lose contact. And it's game over on the first day. So don't expect this to be the procession that we usually expect of the men's race.
I know, it's worth saying, obviously, that the cobbles on the Champs-Élysées are nothing like the cobbles in the rest of northern France when you're on your way up to Roubaix, which, the Champs-Élysées is driven over by a million cars every day, and they are worn down a lot more than the Arenberg Trench. But still, and even when the men get to that final stage in Paris, they're still there going, yeah, you want to be on the side of the road in the drainage bits where it's flat and not bumpy.
Yeah, and I mean anyone that's been to that stage and seen it or heard it, mainly you'll hear that they rattle over those cobbles. So even though they are, as you say, Tom, kind of pedigree cobbles, you still feel it up through your bones.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's of course. But that first day, I can't see. You might get caught out, but at the same time, I can't see anyone taking big risks.
No, I mean the first day is just one for the sprinters to claim first yellow jersey. I think I'm correct in saying this is the first yellow jersey awarded to a woman since 1989, because I don't think La Course did yellow jerseys.
You're the history buff on this one, so
okay, well we'll go with that, and somebody can fact check us and tweet us. And I mean, there's only one person that we think is going to win that stage, and we will come on to that a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But let's look at stage 2, essentially a flat stage with a false flat finish into Provins.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you, Tom. There's a lot of places here that I've never seen before, so the pronunciation
is Banch all over again.
This is Banch all over again.
Like Geraint Thomas calling it Bincher the other day.
I was such a big fan of that. I just love it when riders like Geraint Thomas come to the race and make, they're just like, look, I am what I am. I'm going to say it how I'm going to say it. Bincher.
Look, I'm sorry. His behavior over these last 3 weeks, it's like he's doing L'Etape with his mates. He's not like he's third on GC.
Stage 2, it's from what is it, MUX? MAUX?
MEAUX.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a false flat finish. I mean, it's not a straightforward one.
No, as a day, I don't think it's straightforward. Obviously, you get that. We've just said it's cobbled, but you get that opening day, which is flat and goes to a sprint, and then they're straight into. Again, in 8 days, they've really had to be creative with the route and offer something to every kind of rider there is. So it's not, you don't get your run of sprints. You get one sprint, day one, and then that's it. We're into, sort of all-rounder punchy territory straight away.
Yeah, and I think we see that more going into stage 3, which is from. This word is one of the hardest cities or towns to pronounce in the French language.
Not this
which
one.
is Reims.
Yes, Reims, which it obviously isn't. But
this one really has to come from the back of your throat. I think it's Reims.
I'm not even sure the S gets any notice in there.
Anyway, This is not a French pronunciation podcast, but let's move on. We'll dub this one the Champagne stage because it is very much in Champagne country. On this stage,
to Epinay, yeah.
We've got a spattering of Cat 4 climbs across it. But I think what's interesting, and this is a common theme throughout this race, is that there are a lot of bonus seconds on offer on kind of penultimate climbs.
I like that.
I like it a lot. And we saw in the Women's Tour, I mean, Elisa Longo-Borghini on that final stage in the Women's Tour in the UK in June this year, she won the race basically because she raced savvily and took points in the bonus seconds and then out-sprinted whoever it was she was going for on the last day.
Especially on a day like this. I know, it's down as a hilly one again, but look, there's some Cat 4s and a Cat 3. It makes the day interesting. It isn't necessarily that exciting. People have a lot of opinions on sprint stages that I don't agree with at all. But I do understand that it's not the most entertaining for a lot of people to just watch them roll through the countryside for 150k and then light it up when they hit the Flamme Rouge. And I think this, when there's stuff to compete for in the middle of the stage, it keeps things interesting, keeps the riders on their toes, and it's just something a bit different.
Well, as we've got, I mean, this one, it comes 4 kilometers from the finish.
Yeah,
so
I know
means,
this one is it's quite back-ended still, isn't it?
No, but still, it means that last kind of 5 kilometers is just going to be explosive. It's going to be somebody going over the top and then maybe thinking, actually, I might try and steal a few more seconds going into the line here. So we'll see. I mean, stage 4 is another really interesting one. I think this is one of the ones that people would have starred when it came out. Trois de Bar-sur-Aube, and this is the gravel day.
Troyes is another place that I don't like pronouncing because I saw them draw 4-4 with Newcastle about 20 years ago, and I was convinced it was Troyes for years after that. And it was only when I did French properly, I was like, of course they don't pronounce it like that, and it's Troyes.
I think we can excuse you for that, Tom. I think that's okay.
But yeah, that's like this will be your favourite stage, surely, the pale imitation of Strade Bianche.
Well, look, it's yes, but it's only 13 kilometers of gravel. Albeit through stunning vineyards in northeast France. It's not exactly Strade Bianche, but it will be one for the better bike handlers, and particularly those kind of one-day riders like Marianne Vos, Lotte Kopecky. So
you're all right with gravel, are you? After you tried to eliminate cobbles from the world of cycling the last time we recorded?
Look, I don't think gravel's as difficult as not difficult, but I don't think it's as physically taxing on the human body as cobbles.
That's just, I know what you're like. If you need flat roads. Anything more than that, and I know you struggle on the bike. I've seen your segment times in France last week.
Let's not talk about them here. What annoys about the cobbles, actually, and I was thinking, you know how you see the Amis de Paris-Roubaix, whatever they're called, that kind of fix all the cobbles and everything, and they post pictures like, oh look, we've been doing this stretch today and we've put all the cobbles back in place. And they have not put them back very well. I mean, they line them up, but they still leave like a centimeter between each one.
It's got to be intentional.
If you really cared about them, you'd put them nice and compact, make it easy for the riders, but they don't. These people are treacherous people that are out here making it difficult for everybody. They need to be stopped.
Right. Well, the Amis of the gravel have obviously done a much better job because you think everyone's going to be safe, everyone's going to have a great time, and we're going to see some really exciting racing. Yeah, look, I mean, with gravel, if you slide out, what are you going to do? Skin your elbow. With cobbles, if you slide out, what are you going to do? Break your spine.
Shatter the entire side of your body. So I think I stand by my argument here. But I think it's been an interesting stage. I mean, the pure sprinters I expect will be shaken off in this one because there are some Cat 4 climbs, some difficult gravelly stages.
It's a nasty looking stage, to be honest. I mean, there's more bonus seconds available 5k from the line again, or about 5k from, have I got that right? It's about 9k from the line. There's 4 categorized climbs and 4 gravel sections on top of that.
It's chaos. It's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
Stage 5, a day after chaos, they've gone and given them the longest stage of the race at 175 kilometers and a bit more. Do you want to have a go at pronouncing where this one's to and from, Tom?
So,
Go on, use your French degree.
I don't think this is too bad. So we start in Bar-le-Duc.
Very nice.
It's difficult to read that because it looks like it should say Bar-de-Luc, not Bar-le-Duc. But got through that to Saint-Dié-des-Vosges.
Very good. Okay, no, I should give you the harder ones, actually. I don't know why I tried Rams earlier.
I mean, whenever you see Vosges, I think, this looks like a relatively serene stage, but you're heading for something nasty soon because the Vosges Mountains seem to throw up a surprise whenever the Tour goes there.
Yeah, I mean, this one's probably one for the sprinters again. The sprinters are, quite well gifted with this route, especially in the first 6 stages. They have really stacked the last 2 days of this race, and we'll come on to that in just a second. But even here, we've got kind of bonus seconds available on the Col du Haut-du-Bois, 20 kilometers from the line. So there is going to be opportunities for the race to be kept interesting throughout, even on a sprint day.
Yeah, I mean, look, normally when I look at a stage profile and I see category 4 climbs, I completely ignore them. It's a meaningless category, and only the heaviest riders having their worst days get spat out the back on Cat 4 climbs. Yeah,
but I think on a sprint day, a Cat 4 climb could make a big difference, Especially,
depends.
if you've got bad legs, and I mean, some of them, I think earlier in the race, there was a catfall climb that was like 12% over like a kilometer, which can be quite impactful.
I think it depends where they're positioned as well. Like the last climb here is 20k out from the finish. So even if you do lose the wheel there, you've got plenty of time to get back on.
Yeah, your teammates can get you back on.
Yeah.
That's true. Stage 6, let's not focus too much on this one. It's another kind of lumpy one. Chance for bonus seconds en route to, on the Route de Molkirch, en route to Rochheim. Again, places that I've never heard of before, but I'm excited to discover them.
We're getting into the Alsace because all of a sudden everything's starting to sound very German.
I was thinking that, and especially stage 7, which finishes in Le Markstein-Fellering. I was like, that's not exactly. I did years and years of French, Tom, and that is not one of the words that's come up.
Well, you've done enough French history to know that part of France changed hands every 20 years for about, half a millennium. The Germans and the French just traded the Alsace, didn't they? So there's a lot of Arsene Wenger, his first language is Alsatian. He speaks fluent German and only started speaking French when he went to school, and he was born just outside Strasbourg. So that's why it's all German there.
Is that true?
Yeah. So apparently he speaks Alsatian, which is some form of, I don't know, Low German. And then he speaks standard German. And he only started speaking French when he went to school at the age of 4.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I assume he's not the only one. Lots of people his age who grew up. Obviously, he's old enough to have lived around there when it probably was all had only just gone. It was returned to France after 1945, wasn't it?
You're the history one, Tom. I just do cycling history.
Okay. Well, I'll go and start my podcast on the Franco-Prussian War somewhere else.
Well, look, I mean, I hope who's ever on comms for this race is listening to this, because they've just got a beautiful bit of trivia there for you when they want to bring in Arsene Wenger into the debate. But back to the race, stage 7.
Yeah.
Let's start to Le Markstein-Fellering. 3 category 1 climbs, and then bonus second offered on the lower slopes of the final climb, the Grand Ballon, which translates as
that is French.
Which translates as
the big ball, by the sounds of it.
The big ball, the highest point of this race.
Oh, I see. We go over the Petit Ballon earlier in the stage as well.
I assume that one's slightly smaller in stature.
Well, they're both Cat 1s actually.
Okay.
But the Petit Ballon is 200 meters lower than the Grand Ballon.
Oh, so it's not so petite, is it?
And there's the Col du Platzerwassel in the middle, which we're back with the German there.
Really sharing out the language on this stage. Yeah. It is not a summit finish, though. And I think one of the things that disappoints me about this route, well, there are 2 things that disappoint me about this route. One of them is that there isn't a time trial. And the second thing is that we've only got 1 summit finish, and it comes on the last day.
On the final day, yeah. It is brutal. I mean, we've seen it very recently as a summit finish. It is a horrible, horrible climb. And if you're a rider who was like, sort of late 2000s, if you're a Contador or a Schleck, you must be delighted that you retired when you did and you were not forced to ride up this thing.
The Super Planche des Belles Filles is the name makes it sound quite friendly, I think. Well, maybe not the super bit. The super bit, to be honest, makes it sound a bit naff. But yeah, as you say, it looked absolutely brutal when we saw it in the men's race earlier this month. We saw Tadej Pogačar and Jonas Vingegaard in a real kind of slugfest to the line.
Breaking my heart as they rode past Leonard Kemner.
Yeah. Again, we'll come on to that when we talk about the men's Tour de France next week, Tom. But let's just hope that your fantasy team picks up, because you are in the mud at the moment.
Oh, please, there's a big comeback coming tomorrow on the time trial.
I love the idea of a Grand Tour coming down to a summit finish. Where do you stand on that, Tom? I
don't know. I like it. I do like the sort of processional final stage through the capital. But then when Theo Gegenhardt won the Giro, I thought a time trial on the final day is an absolutely brilliant finish as well. It is very nice to have it competitive to the end. And it really does get the heart race as well. And yeah, a summit finish like that, if obviously we don't know what the situation on the road will be this time next week when they're heading towards there. But if it's close and it is just going to come down to a shootout on the final climb, that would be one of the most dramatic scenes you've ever seen in cycling.
Well, I think crucially, it doesn't even need to be that close. I
Yeah.
think if somebody like, say for the sake of argument, Annemiek van Vleuten has a minute and a half or 2 minutes distance on the rest of the group, which, I mean, she doesn't really have a chance to get because there's a lot of kind of flattish stages or
Very true.
lumpy
Yeah.
ones, but there's not a lot of big mountains or, well, apart from stage 7 to make those sort of time gaps.
Or, as you said, a time trial.
Or a time trial. There's no time trial for that. And she's the Olympic time trial champion. But this one, I think, especially when it gets to 24% slopes, if you're having a bad day, you are having a bad day.
Yeah.
She doesn't often have bad days, so maybe it's not fair to use her as an example. But I just think if somebody's, absolutely flying that day, they could make up a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Look, speak to Primoz Roglic if you want to talk about losing a Grand Tour on these slopes. He's the only one who's had to go through this before. So, and I know that was a time trial; it wasn't on the road, but yeah, if you're having a bad day on those gradients, you go backwards very quickly.
It's brutal. It's a brutal climb, and I am one who sees a lot of these climbs, and I think, oh wow, I would love to take my bike out there and ride up that. I do not have that feeling about the Super Planche des Belfi.
It's not even the super bit that gets me. It's when they first introduced it and Chris Froome won the stage the first time they went over it. You cannot see the riders as they're coming up to the finish line. You see their heads come up over the crest of the hill gradually. It is so steep when the camera is going flat from the finish line down the finishing straight. It's a long time before they come into view. They're coming up and they appear over the crest of the hill so slowly.
Yeah, they just emerge out of the ground.
Yeah, it is so steep.
Tom, I've got a little quiz for you here, if you're interested.
Ooh, yeah, I am, but I feel I might struggle.
It's an all numbers based quiz. There are 3 questions. To be honest, a lot of them are going to be a guess. So we'll see how good you are at guessing numbers. Question 1: how many of France's 13 regions does the race venture into?
Oh, right. So we must finish in Grand Est, and we must start in Ile-de-France. So what is in between those two? I am going to say 4.
The answer is 3.
Oh.
And 6 of the 8 stages take place in the Grand Est.
Yeah. Okay.
The final stage actually finishes in Burgundy, but like proper North Burgundy on the border of the Grand Est. So it's basically what we're looking at here is a tour of the Grand Est.
And is Ile-de-France is that a region or is that just a département?
That is a region. That was the other one. So Paris, Ile-de-France, Grand Est, and Burgundy. Question 2: Epernay. The race goes down the Avenue de Champagne in the finale of that stage, which I think is stage 3.
Mm-hmm.
This avenue is reportedly the most expensive street in the world. Don't ask me how they've measured that.
Okay, I know that I've always been my Champs-Élysées stat has always been. I think that is the second most expensive street to live on in the world.
To live on?
Yeah.
Sorry, when you said that, I thought you meant it was the second most expensive street, and the first most expensive street was called Live On.
No. So the first most expensive street, I read this fact years ago and have repeated it at every possible opportunity. So the Champs-Élysées is second to buy property on, and I think Fifth Avenue in New York is first.
Okay, well, I haven't really done that much research, and a lot of the kind of cheap websites I was on said that this is the most expensive street in the world, but they didn't tell me what the criteria was.
In terms of there being, 200,000 euro bottles of champagne buried underneath it or something.
That's probably what it is. It's probably in terms of assets.
Yeah.
Now, beneath the streets, funny you should mention champagne, Tom, there is a network of chalk cellars that house bottles of champagne.
Mm-hmm. I know.
How many bottles? And here are your 3 options.
I was going to say, this one has to be multiple choice.
2 million, 20 million, or 200 million.
You know what? It's always more than you think. I'm going to go for the biggest one. There's 200 million down there.
Your gamble's paid off, Tom. There are 200 million bottles of champagne underneath the Avenue de Champagne in Epernay.
That is outrageous.
Yeah, I couldn't even begin to imagine what that would look like. But apparently there's a 110 kilometers network of chalk cellars under this street.
Yeah, well, I can't. Well, I know some of the history. I got there's a really good book I read a few years ago, and it talks about how there was a man called Dom Perignon who developed a bottling method for sparkling wine that stopped the glass from shattering, and that's how we've got champagne now. I can't remember. I don't think his real name was Dom Perignon, but obviously everyone knows who I'm talking about because the champagne is still named after him to this day. And I can't quite remember where I was going with this point now either. But
No, that's all right. You're showing off as a real champagne connoisseur here.
Yeah, I don't actually like champagne. Don't like sparkling wine.
Yeah. Okay. Should we move it back onto the cycling then with a third
Yeah,
question?
we can try. I might have a nice anecdote about this one as well. We'll never know.
Okay. Between 2014 and 2021, there were 8 editions of La Course. How many of them were won by Dutch riders?
All of them.
No.
No. Okay. Okay, 7.
You know what? I forgot to write down the answer, so let me just check for you.
Okay, we're reaching new levels of professionalism here.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6 out of 8.
6 out of 8.
So Marianne Vos won the first one.
This was going to be a follow-up. I was going to ask you if you can name the riders who have won La Course, the Dutch riders that have won La Course.
Ooh, how many are there?
4.
4. So Marianne Vos, I assume Annemiek van Vleuten.
Yeah, they've got 2 each.
Anne van der Breggen.
Yeah, that's 3.
And Demi Vollering.
Correct.
Oh,
that's a clean sweep.
I'm happy with that one then.
Hey, we finished the quiz on a high. Well done, Tom.
Yeah, it's gone well. Right.
Now, let's continue on the theme of Demi Vollering here, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
What are her chances at the GC?
I really don't think you can look past Annemiek van Vleuten for the GC. I know she's coming to the end of her career and she's announced her retirement, but she's definitely retiring at the top of her game. She's obviously just won Giro as well. So I think she has to be favourite, and people like Demi Vollering they're going to have to pull off something very special to beat her.
Yeah, I think with the Giro Donna, what we saw with Annemiek van Vleuten is that she is still head and shoulders above the competition. I mean, on the stage 8, she crashed in a descent and then still got up and went on to win.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the road went uphill, she dispatched of her GC rivals with kind of relative ease. And you'll like this, Tom, actually. She actually cited Johan Cruyff in an interview.
I do like that.
In saying that attacking is the best form of defense.
Is it total cycling?
Yeah, basically, yeah. The way she introduced Johan Cruyff was like, she was like, yeah, we've got this Dutch footballer called Johan Cruyff, who is known for his time at Barcelona, who said this. And it was like a proper kind of academic introduction of Johan Cruyff.
To someone who, well, certainly you and I obviously know who Johan Cruyff is.
Yeah, I love it. She won Liège this year. She won Omloop this year. It is yet another vintage season for Annemiek van Vleuten. And I agree with you, Tom, it is difficult to look past her. But look past her, we shall.
Mm-hmm.
I had put down Marta Cavalli as one of my big favourites for this. And then I did a bit more reading and I found out that she is there to support Cecilia Tripp-Ludwig, who is the GC rider for FDJ. Now, I don't really understand the reasoning behind that, and I'm sure there is reasoning behind that, but she came second at the Giro Donna. She seemed to be the only one that could contest, really, with Annemiek van Vleuten.
Yeah.
And she's won some races this year, which are actually quite transferable to this route. I mean, look at her win in Flèche Wallonne, which is kind of a short version of La Planche des Belles Filles. And she also won Amstel Gold, which is a kind of one-day race. And we have a lot of lumpy one-day race style stages in this race. So I don't understand why they haven't gone with her. Maybe she's just not got the legs to do 2 Grand Tours.
It's hard to know, isn't it, when there's only one women's Grand Tour and, you know, it's not as grand as, they're still not doing full-length Grand Tours, are they? Which is a shame. So, and now that this race has come in, you know, there are at least two races more than over a week long to really, you know, tire the legs out. We might start seeing some real Grand Tour specialists come to the fore. Whereas, I mean, again, it's hard to say because Annemiek van Vleuten has been so dominant over this form of racing as well that it's hard to sort of analyze where anyone else fits in at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can look at Demi Vollering as well. I mean, she's one that's being touted as a big GC rider, especially for years to come. I mean, she won the women's tour last year comfortably, albeit that's a very flat race without, the Cat 1 climbs we've got here. She won the Tour of the Basque Country at Zulia earlier this year, winning all 3 stages. Again, that wasn't a particularly tough parcours. I think probably her win at the women's tour is fairly comparable, although it's heavily sprint focused, and we know that she's very good when it's on the flat. But I think her biggest asset at this race is her team. Now, SD Works have brought the full kind of troupe of riders here, like the super domestiques of super domestiques. You've got Marlon Russa, Christine Majerus, Chantal van den Broek-Black, Ashley Moolman-Passio, who could even have a dig at the GC herself if she's got good legs when it comes to the climbing, and then Lotte Kopecky.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about SD Works a lot, how as a team, they are just so on it every time. Tactically, they seem to be spot on. And that is, again, as we've seen in the men's race, if you've got one rider who's completely dominant, you need to use all the resources available to you as a team to go after them and try and crack them.
Absolutely. There are a few other riders that I'm sure will fancy a chance at the GC, but are probably actually just going for kind of a podium place as their best option. I think one of those would be Mavi Garcia, who you can't write off, but again, I don't think it's on the level of, your Van Vleutens at the moment. Cassia Niewiadoma will fancy some of the punchy finishes.
I've got Elisa Longo Borghini's name down here as well.
I was going to say, I think it's similar for Elisa Longo Borghini. I think maybe she's got a better chance at placing higher on the GC. As I said earlier, she won the women's tour with some very savvy racing, sweeping up bonus seconds, which if she does that again, that could be very beneficial. But yeah, I spoke with Cassia Niewiadoma at the women's tour earlier this year, and she was saying that there were certain stages that she'd picked out that she was hoping to win. And one of the journalists asked her which stage that was, and she very wisely did not tell us which one it was going to be. So we can expect to see her go for a stage at some point. I imagine it'll be one of the punchier finishes. Probably, well, maybe even the last one, Super Planche des Belles Filles. Why not?
And in terms of the opening stage, who is going to take the first yellow jersey to be awarded in the women's tour in 40 years?
Well, I mean, look, we could guess around and we could say, could it be Vos? Could it be Balsamo? Could it be Lotte Kopecky? Could it be Demi Vollering? But
the answer is no.
The correct answer is Lorena Wiebes.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the first yellow jersey in how many years is it? 1989?
Since 89. So 33 years.
Yeah. That is, I mean, the first yellow jersey of any tour is obviously prestigious, but there's something way on top of that. And as you said, they're going to be fighting it out. But assuming she gets to the line, you have to think she gets to the line first.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shame that we didn't see her up against Balsamo and Vos at the Giro Donna. I mean, both of those riders took 2 wins each of that race, so they're obviously in good form as well. But Lorena Wiebes was busy in Belgium at the Baloise Ladies Tour, where she took her 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th wins of the season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was getting stuff done as well.
That speaks for itself, really, doesn't it?
It really does. A word on the other sprinters, though. Elisa Balsamo has only beaten Lorena Wiebes in a sprint once this year. And that was in Bruges, Japan. And it was just a fair bunch sprint. There was no kind of reasoning for it. There wasn't like Lorena Wiebes got caught out or anything. She came second to her twice at Ride London. So I think we know Wiebes has got the beating of Balsamo.
Yeah.
Vos is the one that's a bit of a dark horse, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying after this that of the 8 stages, I think there are probably only 2 that will finish in sprints anyway. So after the first one, there's not much for the sprinters to go for anyway.
Yeah, and this is why I think it will favour riders like Lotte Kopecky, Emma Norsgaard, who are more kind of ruler style sprinters, if that makes sense. Like they fancy a punchier finish or a bit more challenging terrain before because they're more powerful. So I mean, there is very much stages for everybody here.
Yeah, which I think is something they've done really well in 8 stages to get a route as varied as it is. When, as we've said, they're not actually, they're in a very thin wedge of northeastern France. So to get the variation in that they have done, I think it looks like a great route. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, me too. I've dusted off my passport. Well, I say dusted off. I was using it last week,
Yeah.
but I've got it back out because I'm off to Paris tomorrow afternoon.
I know. On the Eurostar, off you go, and you'll be covering day one.
I'll be covering day one. I'll be there. Very excited for it, actually. I think it'll be good fun. I mean, I've been to Paris before for the Tour de France, but I mean, this day is going to be a full festival of cycling. I mean, the women's race, I think, starts around 1:30 local time. And then basically it's just like flat out racing on the Champs-Elysees until like 8 o'clock in the evening.
It is great. And I've said this before, I like the way they put the women's first, because I think previously, you've had the women come in after the men, and it does feel like, some sort of after the Lord Mayor's show thing where it's, everyone's there to watch the men and then the women don't get given the attention they deserve. And I think when you do it this way round, it really works. You'll have the crowds there. And yeah, on the whole, just the way they've organized this to give the sport the exposure that it needs is to be commended. It's a step in the right direction anyway.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is, due to ASO putting, finally, after so many years, actual serious backing and serious organization into a race.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think in terms of the sponsors, I mean, we've got Zwift who have come on board and they have fully dedicated to it. I mean, they've supported women's racing for years now. They've got their talent academy that they do with Canyon SRAM that they've done for years. They've I think I was speaking with Kate Verono, who is the director of women's strategy at Zwift recently. And she was saying that Zwift is actually a platform that, I mean, I'm not doing like PR for them here. This is what she said, and I found it interesting. Zwift is a platform that women tend to flock to because riding a bike out on the road can be scary, and finding mates to ride with on the road that are also like you and a woman and starting cycling can also be quite intimidating. So she was like, a lot of women organize group rides on Zwift. So, I mean, it's a platform that is, really involved in the kind of the ethos of it and wants to grow women's cycling. And she said as well, which I think is true, she was like, this is actually just a really good, aside from our responsibility to kind of mediatize women's cycling and grow the profile of it, it's also just a really good business opportunity for them.
It's good for on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to draw more people to their brand, and it's one that people enjoy. So good for them. And also, other cycling platforms are available.
Yeah, I don't actually really know any others, but
neither do I. But I have to say that. Tom, where can people follow whatever we have to say about the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift?
They can, as always, go to @TTPDCST on Twitter and Instagram.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I need to get packed.
I don't, but I will be watching on Sunday afternoon, looking out for you on screen. So you'll have to tell me where on the Place de la Concorde you've managed to situate yourself, and I'll be scanning the crowds.
That's very sweet of you, Tom. I'll let you know. A pleasure as always chatting with you, and thank you very much to everybody for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift as much as we are expecting to. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.